December 24th, 1902, Volume 4, Effects of Sufferings. The Value of Pride. Continuing in my usual state, I found myself outside of myself, and I found our Lord, who had a cross near him, which was all braided with thorns. He took it and placed it upon my shoulders, commanding me to carry it in the midst of a multitude of people, to give proof of his mercy and to placate divine justice. It was so heavy that I carried it bent over and almost dragging myself. While I was carrying it, Jesus disappeared, and as I reached a certain place, the one who was guiding me told me, "Leave the cross and remove your clothes, for our Lord is coming back and he must find you ready for the crucifixion." I removed my clothes, but I kept them in my hands because of the embarrassment my nature felt, and I said to myself, "I will drop them as soon as he comes." At that moment he came back, and finding me with my clothes in my hands, told me, "You have not even let yourself be found completely stripped, so that I might crucify you immediately. Well then, we will leave it for another time." I remained confused and afflicted, unable to articulate a word. And Jesus, to console me, took me by the hand and told me, "Tell me, what do you want me to give you?" And I, "Lord, suffering." And he, "And what else?" And I can ask of you nothing but suffering." And Jesus, "And what about love? Don't you want some?" And I, "No, suffering, because in giving me suffering you will give me more love. I know this out of experience, that in order to obtain grace is the strongest love, and all of you, these cannot be obtained but through suffering. And in order to earn all your sympathies, delights, and satisfactions, the only and sole means is to suffer for love of you." And he, "My beloved, I wanted to test you so as to ignite in you more the desire to suffer for love of me." After this I saw people who believed themselves to be something greater than others, and blessed Jesus said, "My daughter, one who believes himself to be something before me and before men is worth nothing. One who believes himself to be nothing is worth everything. First, before me, because if he does something, he does not think he does it because he can do it, having the strength and the capacity, but rather because he receives from God the grace, the helps, and the lights. Therefore it can be said that he does it by virtue of divine power. And one who has divine power with him is already worth everything. Second, before men, because this acting by virtue of divine power makes him operate in a completely different way, and he does nothing but send forth the light of the divine power he contains within himself, in such a way that the most perverted ones, without wanting it, feel the strength of this light and submit to his volition. And here is how he is worth everything also before men. On the contrary, one who believes himself to be something, in addition to being worth nothing, is abominable to my presence. And because of his ostentatious and particular manners, for he believes he is something and makes fun of others, men keep him pointed out as an object of derision and of persecution. December 24th, 1903, Volume 6, Desires makes Jesus be born in the soul. The same for the devil. This morning, as I was in my usual state, baby Jesus came, and on seeing him so very little, as if he were just born, I said to him, My pretty little one, what was the cause? Who made you come from heaven and be born so little in the world? And he, the reason was love. Not only this, but my birth in time was the outpouring of love of the most holy Trinity toward creatures. In an outpouring of love of my mother, I was born from her womb, and in an outpouring of love, I am reborn in souls. But this outpouring is formed by desire. As soon as the soul begins to desire me, I am conceived. The more she advances in her desire, the more I keep growing in the soul. And when this desire fills her whole interior and reaches the point of overflowing outside, then I am reborn in the whole of man, in his mind, in his mouth, in his works and steps. In the opposite way, the devil also makes his births in souls. As soon as the soul begins to desire and to want evil, the devil is conceived with his perverted works. And if this desire is nourished, the devil grows and fills all of man's interior with passions, the most ugly and disgusting ones, and reaches the point of overflowing outside as man lets all vices rush in. My daughter, how many births the devil makes in these most sad times! If men and demons had the power to do it, they would have destroyed my births in souls. December 24th, 1910, Volume 10. Irresolute souls are good at nothing. Having received communion, I was praying good Jesus for a priest who wanted to know whether the Lord was calling him to the religious state. And good Jesus told me, "My daughter, I call him, but he is always undecided." The souls which are not resolute are good at nothing, while on the other hand, when one is determined and resolute, he surpasses all difficulties, he melts them. And the very ones who raise those difficulties, and seeing him so resolute, become debilitated and do not have the courage to oppose him. It is a little bit of attachment that binds him, and I do not want to contaminate my grace in hearts which are not untied from everyone. Let him detach himself from everything and from everyone, and then my grace will inundate him more, and he will feel the necessary strength to fulfill my call. December 24th, 1924, Volume 17, Pains of Jesus in the Womb of His Mother. How all nature rejoiced and made feast at the birth of Jesus. How by giving himself once, he gave himself forever. The sign that one works for God is firmness. My days are ever more sorrowful. I am under the cruel press of the hard privation of my sweet Jesus, which is upon me like a deadly sword, to kill me continuously. But as it is in the act of inflicting the last blow in order to end it, it leaves it suspended above my head. And I await this last blow like a relief, in order to go to my Jesus. But I wait in vain, and I feel my poor soul and also my nature being consumed and dissolved. Oh, my great sins do not make me deserve to die. What pain! What long agony! Oh, please, my Jesus, have pity on me. You alone know my harrowing state. Do not abandon me. Do not leave me at the mercy of myself. Now, while I was in this state, I felt I was outside of myself, within a most pure light. And in this light I could see the Queen Mamma and the little baby Jesus inside her virginal womb. Oh God, in what a sorrowful state was my adorable little baby! His little humanity was immobilized. His little feet and hands were immobile without the slightest movement. There was no space, either to open his eyes or to breathe freely. His immobility was such that he seemed to be dead while he was alive. I was thinking to myself, who knows how much my Jesus suffers in this state, and how much his beloved Mamma suffers in seeing baby Jesus so immobilized within her own womb. Now, while I was thinking of this, my little baby, sobbing, said to me, "My daughter, the pains I suffered in this virginal womb of my Mamma are incalculable to the human mind. But do you know what was the first pain which I suffered in the first act of my conception, and which lasted for all my life? The pain of death. My divinity descended from heaven as fully happy, intangible by any pain and by any death. When I saw my little humanity being subject to pain and to death for love of creatures, I felt the pain of death so vividly that I really would have died of pure pain if the power of my divinity had not sustained me with a prodigy, making me feel the pain of death and the continuation of life. So for me it was always death. I felt the death of sin, the death of good within the creatures, and also their natural death. What a cruel torment this was for me, for all of my life. I, who contained life and who was the absolute Lord of life itself, had to subject myself to the pain of death. Don't you see my little humanity immobile and dying in the womb of my dear Mamma? And don't you yourself feel how hard and excruciating is the pain of feeling like dying without dying? My daughter, it is your living in my will that makes you share in the continuous death of my humanity. So I spent almost the whole morning close to my Jesus, inside the womb of my Mamma, and I saw that, as he was in the act of dying, he regained life, to abandon himself to death again. What pain to see baby Jesus in that state! After this, at night, I was thinking of the act in which the sweet little baby came out of the maternal womb to be born into our midst. My poor mind wandered within a mystery so profound and all love. And my sweet Jesus, moving in my interior, stretched out his little hands to embrace me and said to me, "My daughter, the act of my birth was the most solemn act of all creation." Heaven and earth felt plunged into the most profound adoration at the sight of my little humanity, which kept my divinity as though enclosed within walls. So in the act of my birth, there was an act of silence and of profound adoration and prayer. My Mamma prayed, enraptured by the power of the prodigy which was coming out from her. Saint Joseph prayed. The angels prayed, and the whole of creation felt the strength of the love of my creative power as being renewed upon itself. All felt honored and received true honor, for the one who had created them was going to use them for all that was needed by his humanity. The sun felt honored in having to give its light and heat to its creator, recognizing the one who had created it, its true Lord. And it made feast and paid him honor by giving him its light. The earth felt honored when it felt me lying in a manger. It felt touched by my tender limbs and rejoiced with gladness with prodigious signs. All creation, all created beings, saw their true King and Lord within their midst, and feeling honored, each one wanted to perform its office for me. The water wanted to quench my thirst. The birds, with their trills and warblings, wanted to cheer me. The wind wanted to caress me. The air wanted to kiss me. Each one wanted to pay me its innocent tribute. Only men, ungrateful, even though all felt something unusual within themselves, a joy, a strong power, were reluctant, and suffocating everything did not move. Although I called them with tears, with moans and sobs, they did not move, except for a few shepherds. Yet it was for man that I was coming upon earth. I was coming to give myself to him, to save him, and to bring him back to my celestial fatherland. Therefore I was all eyes to see whether he would come before me in order to receive the great gift of my divine and human life. So the incarnation was nothing but giving myself at the mercy of the creature. In the incarnation, I gave myself at the mercy of my dear mamma. When I was born, Saint Joseph too added, to whom I gave the gift of my life. And since my works are eternal and are not subject to end, this divinity, this Word who descended upon earth, never withdrew from the earth, in order to have the opportunity to give himself continuously to all creatures. As long as I lived, I gave myself in an unveiled manner, and then a few hours before dying, I made the great prodigy of leaving myself in the sacrament, so that whoever wanted me could receive the great gift of my life. I paid no attention either to the offenses they would give to me, or to the refusals to receive me. I said to myself, I have given myself. I do not want to withdraw ever again. Let them do to me whatever they want. I will always belong to them and be at their disposal. Daughter, this is the nature of true love. This is to work as God, firmness, and not to withdraw at the cost of any sacrifice. This firmness in my works is my victory, the greatest one of my glory, and this is the sign to know whether the creature works for God. Firmness. The soul looks to no one in the face, neither to pains, nor to herself, nor to self-esteem, nor to creatures. Even though it may cost her her own life, she looks only at God, for love of whom she set herself to work, and she feels victorious in offering the sacrifice of her life for love of him. Not being firm is of the human nature and of the human way of working. Not being firm is the work of passions and with passion. Mutability is weakness, it is cowardice, and it is not of the nature of true love. Therefore firmness must be the guide in working for me. So in my works I never change. Whatever the events may be, when a work is done once, it is done forever. December 24th, 1926, Volume 20. Laments and Sorrows because of the privation of Jesus. Pains of Jesus in the maternal womb. One who lives in the divine will is like a member bound to the creation. I felt all in restlessness because my sweet Jesus was not coming. But while I was raving, I would speak nonsense, and in the intensity of my sorrow I kept repeating, Jesus, how you have changed! I never would have believed that you would reach the point of depriving me of yourself for so long. But while I was pouring out my sorrow, sweet Jesus came as a little child, and throwing himself into my arms, he said to me, My daughter, tell me, and you, have you changed? Do you perhaps love someone else? Do you no longer want to do my will?" These questions of Jesus cut me to the quick, and sorry, I said, "Jesus, what do you mean by this? No, no, I have not changed, nor do I love or know any other love, and I would love to die rather than not to do your most holy will." And Jesus sweetly added, "So you have not changed? Well then, my daughter, if you who have a nature subject to changing have not changed, could I myself change, who am unshakable? Your Jesus does not change. Be sure of this, nor can he change." I remained confused and did not know what to say, and he added, all goodness, "Do you want to see how I was in the womb of my sovereign mamma, and what I suffered within her?" Now while he was saying this, he placed himself inside of me, in the middle of my breast, laying flat, in a state of perfect immobility. His little feet and hands were so stretched and immobile as to arouse pity. He lacked the space to be able to move, to open his eyes, to breathe freely. And what was most harrowing was to see him in the act of dying continuously. What pain to see my little Jesus die! I felt myself placed, together with him, in that same state of immobility. Then after some time, little baby Jesus, squeezing me to himself, told me, "My daughter, my state in the maternal womb was so very painful. My little humanity had perfect use of reason and of infinite wisdom. Therefore, from the first instant of my conception, I comprehended all my sorrowful state, the darkness of the maternal prison. I had not even a glimmer of light. What a long night of 9 months! The narrowness of the place that forced me into perfect immobility, always in silence. Nor was it given to me to wail or to sob, so as to pour out my pain. How many tears did I not shed in the sacrarium of the womb of my mamma, without making the slightest movement? And this was nothing. My little humanity had taken on the commitment to die so many times in order to satisfy divine justice, for as many times as creatures had made the divine will die within them, committing the great affront of giving life to the human will, making a divine will die in them. Oh, how these deaths cost me! To die and to live and to die. This was the most harrowing and continuous pain for me. More so since, even though my divinity was one with me and inseparable from me, in receiving these satisfactions from me, it would take the attitude of justice. And although my humanity was holy and pure, it was the little lamp before the immense sun of my divinity, and I felt all the weight of the satisfactions that I was to give to this divine sun, and the pain of decayed humanity that was to rise again in me at the cost of so many deaths of mine. It was the rejection of the divine will by giving life to one's own will that formed the ruin of decayed humanity, and I was to keep my humanity and my human will in a continuous state of death, so that the divine will might have continuous life in me, in order to extend in me its kingdom. From the moment I was conceived, I thought about and occupied myself with extending the kingdom of the supreme Fiat within my humanity, at the cost of giving no life to my human will, in order to make decayed humanity rise again, so that once this kingdom would be founded within me, I might prepare the graces, the necessary things, the pains, the satisfactions that were needed in order to make it known and to found it in the midst of creatures. Therefore, everything you do, what I do in you for this kingdom, is nothing other than the continuation of what I did from the moment I was conceived in the womb of my mamma. So if you want me to carry out the kingdom of the eternal Fiat within you, let me be free and never give life to your will. After this I continued my acts in the eternal volition, and sweet Jesus added, My daughter, my will is the soul, and all creation is the body for it. And just as the soul is one in the body, one is its will, while the body has many different senses, and like many different keys, each one of them performs its own little sonata, and each member exercises its distinct office. However, there is such order and harmony among them, that when one member exercises its office, all the other members are all intent on the operating member, and they suffer together if that member suffers, and they enjoy if it enjoys, because one is the will that moves them, one is the strength that they possess. Such is the whole creation. It is like a body animated by my will, and even though each created thing does its distinct office, they are so united among themselves as to be more than members to the body. Since it is my will alone that animates them and dominates them, one is the strength that they possess. Now, one who does my will and lives in it is a member that belongs to the body of creation, and therefore she possesses the universal strength of all created things, excluding not even that of her Creator, because my will circulates in the veins of all creation as more than blood within the body, a blood that is pure, holy, vivified with light, and that reaches the point of spiritualizing the body itself. The soul is all intent on all creation, to do what it does, to be in communication with all of its acts. And all creation is intent on her, to receive her acts, because the office, the little sonata of this member in the midst of it is so beautiful that all are intent on listening to her. Therefore, the living in my will is the most happy and indescribable destiny. Her acts, her point of origin, are always toward heaven. Her life is in the midst of the spheres. December 24th, 1929, Volume 27. When Jesus speaks of his truths, he unleashes light. The truths, read and reread, are like wrought iron. Run of the divine will. I was thinking about all that my sweet Jesus, with so much goodness, deigns to tell to my poor soul, and that as I reread them in the circumstances, sparkle with light. And my always lovable Jesus told me, My daughter, when I speak, I unleash light of truth, and I want that it be accepted and caressed by the soul. If this light is accepted and put in a place of honor in her interior, it calls for another light. So one calls for another. Otherwise it goes back to its source. And when the soul returns to read them, if they are written, and to ponder them, my truths are like wrought iron. As the iron is beaten, it becomes red hot and gives out sparkles of light, while if it is not beaten, the iron is hard, black, and an ice-cold metal. So it is with my truths. If the soul reads them over and over again, in order to suck the substance that is inside my truths that have been communicated to her soul, that is symbolized by the iron, its blackness and coldness, she remains red hot. And by pondering them, she strikes blows over herself, who has received the good of hearing my truth, that feeling honored sparkles with light of more truths. But if my manifested truths are put into oblivion, nor are they put in a place of honor, they remain as though buried. But the living are not buried. In fact, they are light that possesses and brings life. Therefore, since they are not subject to dying, the time will come in which others will treasure them, and will condemn those who have kept them in oblivion and as though buried. If you knew how much light there is in everything I have manifested to you on my divine will, and how much more light would sparkle if they were read and reread, you yourself would remain eclipsed and amazed at the great good they would do. Then I was continuing my acts in the divine volition, and I was thinking about the loneliness of Jesus in the womb of his mamma. He added, "My daughter, how sweet and pleasing to me is the company of the creature. Since my descent from heaven to earth was precisely for her, to find her, to make her my own, keeping her in my company, I feel it as though repaid. However, know that if I am content with the mere company of the creature who loves me and tries to break my loneliness, with one who lives in my divine will, I am not content. I want her always together with me, as spectator of my baby tears, of my moans, of my sobs, my pains, works, and steps, and also of my joys, because I want to make the deposit of them in her. In fact, my will being in her, it would be too hard for me if I did not have her always together with me, keeping her aware of everything. My divine will feels the irresistible need to share with the creature everything it does in my humanity, so that the will that reigns in me and what reigns in the creature might not be a divided will. And this is the reason why I call you in each of my acts, and I want you to know what I have done and what I do, so as to give it to you as gift, and be able to say, 'The one who lives in my divine will never leaves me. We are clasped and inseparable.' And I, my love, your run of love never stops. You run always, and I feel I am incapable of doing my runs of love as you do them. I am too little, and I do not have the flight of running everywhere to love you." And my sweet Jesus added, "My daughter, you too can do runs of love in the immense sea of my divine will. You will act as a ship does. When it wants to cross the sea, it plunges into the sea. The waters split and let it pass. And while it moves quickly, it leaves a white wake behind itself, as the sign that the ship is passing through that point of the sea. And then, little by little, the wake disappears, and no sign is left that the ship ever passed. But in spite of this, the ship has done its run in the sea, and has arrived there where it had established to go. In the same way, if the soul wants to love, she will plunge into the sea of my divine Fiat, and will form her run of love. She will go around all eternity, and it will not happen to her as to the ship, that nothing remains in the sea of it having passed, as the waters, proud, close from behind, leaving no trace that the ship ever passed. On the contrary, in the sea of my divine volition, As the soul plunges into it to do her run, our divine waters seethe, and in their gurgling they form the furrow that does not disappear, but the sign remains, and it points out to everyone her run of love done within our sea, in such a way that we are able to say, "Through here passed, and did her run of love, the one who lives in our will, because what is done in it remains as indelible." In the same way, if you want to do your adorations, if you want to be embellished, if you want to be sanctified, if you want to be powerful, wise, plunge yourself into our holy will, and while you do your run, you will remain all love, all beauty, all holy. You will acquire the science of who your Creator is, and all your motions will be profound adorations. And you will leave in our sea as many furrows, for as many different runs as you have done in the divine Fiat, in such a way that we will say, "In this run that the little daughter of our divine volition did in our sea, she formed the furrow of sanctity, and we sanctified her, and she remained holy. In this other run she plunged into the sea of our beauty, and formed her furrow, and we embellished her, and she remained embellished. In this other run she formed the furrow of our knowledges, and she knew us, and we spoke to her, and made ourselves known, and spoke to her at length of our divine being. Our word bound her, identified her with us, and we feel the irresistible need to make ourselves known more and more, and to give her the greatest gift of manifesting to her our truths. So for each run you do in our supreme Fiat, you always take of our own, and our love, seething, speaks of you to us, and points out to us your runs with its gurgling, as the sign that you have been in our divine sea. December 24th, 1936, Volume 34, The Celestial and Divine Mother and the Human Mother. Swift race of love of God, in which he lets Jesus be generated in every creature by this mother, in virtue of the Fiat. The same theme on the Most Holy Virgin continues. A light that descends from the bosom of the Eternal One invests my poor mind, but it is a speaking light that says so many things about the celestial sovereign lady that I do not know how to be able to tell them all. But my beloved Jesus, with his usual goodness, tells me, "Courage, my daughter, I will help you. I will administer to you the words." I feel the irresistible need to make known who this mother of mine is, the dowries, the privileges, and the great good that she does, and that she can do for all the generations. Therefore listen to me, and I will tell you things never thought of either by you or by others, in a way as to shake the most incredulous, ungrateful, and sinners, and even where our love reaches. So our love did not give itself peace. It ran, but with such a rapidity that it engaged our whole divine being to give into such excesses as to make heaven and earth astonished, as to make everyone exclaim, "Is it possible that a God has loved creatures so much?" Therefore listen, my daughter, to what our great love does. The creatures have a celestial Father. Our love was not content. In its delirium and folly of love, it wanted to form for them a celestial mother and an earthly mother, such that if the attentions, the love, The tendernesses of the celestial paternity were not enough for them in order to love him. The love, the indescribable tendernesses of this celestial and human mother would have been the ring of conjunction that, having banished every distance, terror, and fear, they would have abandoned themselves into her arms in order to let themselves be conquered by her love, so as to love he who had formed her for their love, and in order to make himself loved. Therefore there were necessary the most stupendous portents and a love that never says enough, and that only a God can do in order to obtain the intent. Now listen to what it does. We called this holy creature from nothing, and making use of the same seed of the human generations, yet purified, we gave her life. From the first instant of this life, the celestial virtue of our divine Fiat united and formed together divine life and human life, such that she grew divinely and humanly. And participating in the divine fecundity, it formed in her the great prodigy of being able to conceive a man and a God. With the human seed, the humanity of the incarnate Word could form, and with the seed of the Fiat, the divine Word could be conceived. With this, the distance between God and man ceased. This Virgin, by being human and celestial, brought man and God closer, and gave the brotherhood to all her children, so that everyone could approach him, to live together and admire in him and in her the same features. Invested by the same human nature, they would have had such trust and love as to let themselves be conquered, and to love who loved them so much. What love does a good mother not receive from her own children? More so because she was powerful, rich, and had placed her life in order to place her own children in safety. And what did she not do in order to render them happy and holy? In fact, the humanity of the Word and the Mother Celestial and human are as down payments in order to entrust to themselves the love of everyone, and to tell them with all love, "Do not fear, come to us. We resemble each other in everything. Come, and we will give you everything. My arms are always ready to embrace you, and in order to defend you, I will enclose you in my heart, so as to give you everything. It is enough to tell you that I am your mother, and that my love is so much that I hold you conceived in my heart. But this is nothing yet. I was God. I had to operate as God. Our love ran. It ran and it went inventing other more excessive discoveries of love. You yourself will remain amazed in hearing them. And when the human generations will hear it, they will love us so much as to reciprocate us in great part for the great course of our love. Now pay attention to me and thank me, my blessed daughter, for what I am about to say. It was not enough for our love, as I said before, that in virtue of our Fiat, everyone would be conceived in the heart of this Virgin, in order to have true maternity, not with words, but with deeds. And she was conceived in every creature, so that each one would have a mother all his own, and have the full right and the possession that all would be her children. Now our love passed to another excess. Therefore you must first know that this celestial queen, possessing all the fullness of our divine Fiat, that possesses by nature its generative and bilocating virtue, she, together with the divine Fiat, can generate and bilocate as many times as she wants her Son God. Therefore our love imposed itself over this celestial creature, and giving into delirium with the virtue of my fiat that she possessed, it gave her the power of letting her generate her Jesus in every creature. She makes him be born. She raises him. She does everything for him that is necessary in order to form the life of her dear Son. She supplies for what the creature does not do for him. If he cries, she dries his tears. If he is cold, she warms him. If he suffers, she suffers together. And while she acts as mother and raises her Son, she acts as mother and raises the creature. In fact, one can say that she raises them together. She loves them with a single love. She watches over them. She nourishes them. She clothes them. And with her maternal arms, she forms two wings of light, and covering them, she hides them in herself, in her heart, in order to give them the most beautiful rest. Therefore it is not enough for our love that the Word would incarnate himself in order to generate one single Jesus for everyone, and give one single mother to all the human generations. No, no, our love would not have been excessive. Its course was so fast that it did not find one who places an enough for them. And then it quieted itself in some way when, with its power, it generated this mother in every soul, and let her generate her Jesus, so that each one would have mother and Son at their disposition. Oh, how beautiful it is to see this celestial mother, all love and all intent on every creature, to generate her Jesus, in order to form a portent of love, of grace. And this is the greatest honor and glory that her Creator has given her, and the strongest love that God could give to creatures. Nor is there anything to marvel about. Our Fiat can do everything and can reach everywhere. Everything is that it wants it. If it wants it, it is already done. Rather, the marvel is in knowing to what excesses the love toward man has brought us. End of December 24th. Fiat.